like showing up, and I feel like this is a cool opportunity for you all to learn a little bit more about me, and I can kind of just be more uh, not explicit, but I guess like more transparent, maybe transparent, explicit. Like it's all just there. Like this is what I mustered up within a couple of hours of uh, kind of like, well, a couple of hours of like real work, and then what I would think of as like a week of like really thinking about it, trying to understand how to convey this information, like with a PowerPoint or without a PowerPoint. So like something I'll like comment on, and something I just kind of realize is um, something like a meta-analysis of how we present things or convey information is that like a lot of tribal elders, you'll find a few decades kind of has some way to convey their knowledge. And so like I'll see like elders who can like explain the like four worlds or like the different like aspects of the creation story, all these very specific things with like, okay, like my knuckle here represents this represents this, and this. So it's like basically your hands are enough, or like if you're missing a hand and you have like one hand and an arm, like you have enough to convey your thoughts abstractly. So like that's just something to keep in mind, I think. And just to contextualize a little bit more, like Yat Esh A Ivan Rajen Ineshia Kia Ani Shle do Easterdian Bashashin Ado Che de Guy A Dash Che do Easterdian A Dash Nale. That's just a way to greet a Navajo person or someone who knows the language as a Navajo person. But like whether you're Navajo or not, like you your biology or your life story can fit to the formula that we use to convey our like who we are or our genealogy or like some coarse understanding of that. Like so, for instance, when I say Kia Ani Nishle, I'm saying I am Kiani. So Nishle is like that is I am. So it's like I am Kiani. That's who my mom is. That's who her mom was. Her mom's. Like we're all like somewhat familiar with mathematics. So it's like take the limit as n approaches like some large number. So that's like the root, I guess. There's like that root within the social structure. And then in recent times, like last 100 years or so, there's like this concept of like the mitochondria being rooted to the mom. So it's like certain parts that are like time immemorial are starting to be understood today and justified today with modern techniques and technology. Let's see. So who I am, I'm 25 years old. I'm Diné, Oneida, and Indian. That's like the white people way I think of like viewing it. Like that's my fractions, like that's my partial fraction decomposition or whatever. So like uh yeah, really I'm just human, and I think the more that we can get away without like sharing like those ethnobiographical like details, like the better off we'll be maybe. But that's like another discussion, or like that's outside the realm of engineering. So that's definitely like bears relevance on engineering, like when we start talking about like uh, getting like our people in like those chairs of executive seats and stuff like that. And yeah, so I'm a physicist turned bioengineer. I'm a what I would define as like a super nerd. So like I just love mathematics. I love physics. I love computers, languages, video games, anime, films, TV shows, books, music, like fake universes, the real universe we live in, like all of it. And uh, it's can kind of be like a mess sometimes, like just trying to understand all these things in terms of mathematics and physics when like our real feelings are not like rooted in that, so it's like trying to like prevent yourself from getting triggered, is like part is how I see it, and it's like, or at least like through navigating the university and navigating like the globalized world as we see it, it's like does that offend me? Like it kind of does. Like should it offend me though? Like maybe not. Like going into this history and unraveling this history kind of helped me out. I think it kind of really made me question like why am I triggered about these events in human history or in the past, or like this like this happened to the Navajo people, this didn't happen to me, like this happened to my ancestors, someone along the line. like couldn't do something about what was going on, you know? So it's like you just kind of like having that adult conversation with yourself, like about these historical events, I think is really like it's just a necessity. Like there's no way to get around without doing that. And just to like briefly note, my research is primarily rooted in simulation of electric fields at multiple scales of space and time. So basically, understanding how to simulate electric fields. So that's like the field generated by charge. So like charge is like electrons or any ion could be could carry charge, or even a large protein or a molecule that has like then there's like more complicated charge structures there, you know. So just trying to understand that at like nanometers to like micrometers to millimeters to and uh, how that correlates to timing and frequency within the brain. So like if the basal ganglia operates at some so on and so forth, then try and understand what we've calculated from those distributions of ions. Can we like correlate timing and structure and function? And yeah, so just to not get too carried away with that, and like I'm still formulating that. My thesis is nowhere near done, but just like a few more years or a few more months, somewhere in between there. And so yeah,
Hey,
so
Ivan, I have to say, for someone who works on such a complicated topic, you always do an awesome job unwrapping it or unpackaging it. Just wanted to throw that out there.
that means like there's no higher compliment in academia.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, what you work on is like, I mean, most people probably feel it's pretty abstract, but yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. But yeah.
Appreciate that. I would love to just like go on a nice 20-minute uh what do you call it? Like a tangent. Like but
Yeah, next time, next time.
sounds good. And yeah, we could definitely yeah, we'll talk at the end of this too some more. Contextualizing our story. So trying to I guess like in trying to convey as much as I can within an hour about the Navajo people or about what I've come to understand as my background as a living being is uh, so like just trying to find like I think in terms of mathematics and numbers all the time. So I was just thinking like, what is the rule of thirds here? What are the three key elements that can really convey this information? So to me, that's language, culture, and history. And all of these overlap or map back onto themselves. And each contains some type of clue that we as modern day thinkers or intellectual life forms can utilize. So like ancient roots, for instance, that would be like uh, trying to understand how far back Navajo people go just based on what academics have come to believe is like the inception or the emergence or the divergence of two different. So the divergence of language groups is pretty much how we're dating ourselves right now. So it's like 3,600 years ago, the Proto-Athapaskan and Proto-Eyak languages split into what they are now, or at least like into some common ancestor of languages has split into two different dialects that people as far north as Alaska speak and as far south as New Mexico, like as the modern day Navajo Nation. Uh, and then our culture is a matriarchal clan structure. So a bit about that mitochondria that I mentioned is uh, pretty crucial or inherent, or like just very fundamental to how we structured ourselves socially. So I'm just thinking of like one specific instance is like I have friendships that only exist because my mom and their mom are friends. So it's like that's something that's not inherent or only exists within Navajo people. Like that can obviously exist within any people's family or household. Like and I'd argue that's probably the case for everybody. But this year, it's a little bit more explicit. It's like the land, power, wealth, all of that's inherited uh, by the by the woman. by the Asa is the word for woman in Navajo, so Asa, and Hastin is the word for man. And uh, can just like briefly mention the like polygamy, monogamy, things like that. Like uh, in the past, it seems like there were women who had multiple male partners, and there were men who had multiple female or woman partners. So it's uh, not super black and white. It's not just like a complete antithesis of United States, like what we're taught, like grow up, find a partner, settle down. Like that's kind of coded differently, like within our language and within how we speak to each other. And then history. So contextualizing our history through our interaction with other groups. So you'll hear me bring up Pueblos quite often, and that's because I think they have uh, a more ancient route to that land, to the southwest and to parts of modern day like didn't just inherently accept or acknowledge is that fact that we root ourselves to the land and to this place. Like we define our history based upon Pueblos. So without Pueblos, we we would be something else. No pun intended. And these photos over here, this photo right here, the one on the left is my great grandma and her daughter. So my great grandma, or no, my great grandma's mom and her on the left. So this is my grandma. This is her mom. This is her sister, her dad, some other folks who I have no idea. But I'm pretty sure this woman right here is this one's mom, or it's the opposite way. So this could be either my great great grandma or my great grandma, or this is my great grandma and grandma. And then this is their family. Well, I guess my family, but like I'm probably only some fraction of them. But that's probably the like that's the primary factor. I would say like I was mostly raised uh like I would just say I was mostly raised by my mom, like raised by my mom, my dad, uncles, aunts, grandma, grandpa, cousins, all that. But it's like that primary factor has to be my mom, at least in this scenario. And so the Diné people, well, Diné means people, basically like a one-to-one translation. So uh, uh, like before, I mean, like I was gonna say before contact with like non-Athapaskans, but I'm guessing that's like the case the whole time that language has been around is either native tribes or like other native tribes up there in uh, like Alaska area, Canada area, United States. Like there's a lot of flux of people. So I'm not like the expert or anything like on these specific histories, but I guess yeah, it's just important to know that like Navajo is a word that we didn't come up with, and that was actually from the Tiwa language. So again, like the Pueblos here contextualizing our history a bit. So like Navajo is a word from Tiwa meaning a large area of cultivated lands. So that's like uh, I really like that. Like I liked hearing that or like seeing that on Wikipedia and uh, understanding that word from that perspective. Because prior to that, I had heard that Navajo meant a knife wielding thief in Spanish. So there's like an interesting linguistic history for every word basically, uh, and so like Diné is how we refer to ourselves, and the Athapaskans up in Alaska, Canada area, they'll refer to themselves as Dene, like Dene. So there's just a striking overlap. And from what I've heard, like again, this is all like everything is hearsay. Like there's an element of truth and an element of falsity to every statement, I think. Like uh, just from a mathematical perspective, uh, that's something that helps us analyze lots of things quantitatively, uh, like from frameworks of information theory and understanding what the mutual information is or the what information is similar between two things or n things, and how much information is dissimilar between those objects. So you can see how like mathematics is a really, I'd say it's a it is a language in and of itself, but it's one that's like very much reliant on prepositions. So like whether something is on something, in something, around something, by means of something, like there's some type of prepositional phrase there for every mathematical operation or theorem or corollary to a theorem. Uh, and that's, yeah, not to detract too much from this. And so in modern day times, we traditionally inhabit the Four Corners area. So that's modern day Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. And there's a Navajo band or something, but I think they're actually just Navajo people. So like this four corner structure, there's like some more amorphous uh, like perimeter that really I think like there'd be like some overlap between Pueblo people, between Ute people, between Navajo people. Like for instance, the Hopi Nation, which is a Pueblo, is is an island within the Navajo Nation, if that makes sense. So there are like there are reses within reses, basically, and so that's just I guess kind of just to add on a theme to this whole presentation is that when I talk about the Navajo people, there's no real clear definition of a Navajo person. But within the social structure, because of this clan system and this adoption of clans or this modularity with respect to how we incorporate people who then barter or deal with Navajos, there's this uh, yeah, I kind of forget where I'm going with that because I think I'm going to talk a bit about more about the matriarchal structure in the next slide, but I've covered a bit about that to where I may not even cover some of that. But yeah, so today there are 300,000 enrolled members, and that's like I think there's about 300, or estimates say there's 300 million Americans. There's probably way more than that. Uh, so Navajo people represent maybe even like a percentage of, or yeah, I don't know if my math is getting kind of weak at this point, or at least like uh, understanding math at like the numbers level is getting kind of, uh, it's getting like, I guess like that's just an aside is that, and a fun thing about math is like the more you start thinking about it, not as numbers, the more you start seeing like math as, or a lot of like math within a lot of things and a lot of structures. So here's just a map to show you explicitly like how much land is covered by the Athapaskan language and just how far reaching uh, those vectors went, you know, like from basically Alaska all the way to Mexico. That's a substantial distance. And I think there's like some implicit line or implicit migration trail from just the ends of the distribution. And yeah, so 4 million kilometers squared, 3,600 years ago. Uh, this is just like a very, like a high level look at Navajo people in time and space. So like, yeah, I mean, this image just makes me proud in and of itself, but it's like, it makes me question like my relationship to myself as a colonizer, uh, like Navajo people not being of the land of the Pueblo land, like that's that like that that doesn't make me like I don't know. Yeah, it's a tough question to ask myself. Like, I'm not truly native to the Four Corners area. I may have some ancestry there, but like to define myself as a Navajo means that I've dated myself as having entered that region several thousands of years ago rather than tens of thousands of years ago. So yeah, just to uh, recap the matriarchal clan structure. So again, this is just how I would describe myself, and you yourself could find four clans or four identifiers that define who you are when you're thinking about who you are. And basically, it's like it's all just rooted to your mother or your dad's mom or your mom's dad's mom or your dad's mom. So all of these belong to a mother of one of my grandparents or the grandparents of my parents. So again, I am Kiani. That's something I learned when I was like 4 years old, very young. Like some Navajos go by Kinyaani. I don't go to myself. It's like she was the matriarch at that time. So I'm gonna just like it just makes sense to uh, like I take that at face value rather than what someone else says. So that's like another tidbit about Navajo culture is that like every Navajo will tell you something like just a bit different. Like there's always a variation there to something cultural, something spiritual, and that's why it's nice to always humble ourselves and root ourselves back to Pueblos and say like, okay, well, like we didn't have agriculture until they taught us, and uh, all these different things. And yeah, and I just wanted to mention this stuff too, like taboos, divorce, like the relationship stuff. I know not to like trigger anybody, but like that is uh, like definitely an interesting part about the culture, I think, and definitely uh, very likely has contributed towards our continued life, I think. So like taboo, and yeah, that's an opinion though. But so taboo is it's a taboo to date, marry, or hook up with anyone who shares your clans. So like sometimes you'll hear Navajo introduce themselves, and they'll say something like, uh, "Oh, yeah." So you'll meet a Navajo, and they'll introduce themselves, and then they may say, or you'll hear two clans that are the same. Like you'll hear their mom's clan and then their like dad's clan. Like that's the worst case is like if you are Kia'ani and you're born for Kia'anis, then both of your parents were Kia'ani or both your parents were siblings more or less. Or they at least had some common ancestor, like close enough to where there's like very likely some like tangible, like measurable DNA overlap. And divorce happens when the matriarch leaves the partner's shoes outside of the hogan. That's that's again kind of like we stray further and further from those ideologies as the years go by. It seems like there's it's not like I can't just like proudly say like yep there's no domestic issues on the Navajo Nation. Whenever like divorce needs to happen, it just happens with the partner's shoes. Like that's not the case anymore. Things are a lot more complicated, and but it is nice to keep that in mind. Like that's our root. That's our clan's origins. And this diagram, sorry, this has been all over the place, like all out of order, super nonlinear. It's like slide 3 goes to slide 5, slide like 6 goes to slide 8 or something. It's like uh, all, all very, it just is. It just is. And so this diagram, I just wanted to again juxtapose this idea uh, of information that's been recorded within the environment. So that could be like recorded on paper, recorded on stone, uh, recorded. Uh, like looking at carbon dating on rocks or trees. All of that's like very tangible, like written down, can be expressed as like a variable, like uh, something that's not as floating or as uh, like arguably the information we transmit from generation to generation through stories, songs, just words, or like phonetics. And even I'm sure that in many cases there's a lot conveyed just through sign language as well. Um, but yeah, I guess like that's something I'd like myself to keep in mind, like as I proceed through academia, but also like a food for thought for everyone here, that we can look at these timelines and we can look at them in terms of what do we like, how do we interpret information that's written or unwritten, and is there more of a respect placed on written language just because it's written down, but then that calls into question like who was the observer who wrote about it, or that whole concept of history, like his story or their story, someone particular specific took a fragment of really, it's like things can be taken with a grain of salt, I think, whether that is the creation story itself or written works about the Mexican-American War or linguistic studies on Proto-Athapaskan Yaak divergence, the fairness of the Treaty of Bosque Redondo, or like the like what crucial aspects of Pueblo Revolt played towards who we are today. Uh, so yeah. Uh, so yeah, again, mentioning about how our ways of life come from Pueblo people. Uh, this uh, I understand this just in terms of uh, like in terms of Western thought, or in terms of academic, like what's written in books or like all that. But that is starting to change too now, since some of that information gets reinterpreted for YouTube and for Wikipedia, and then we have to question this. Yeah, we're always just questioning information. Uh, so it is what it is, and a lot of like whenever like us Navajos, we pray with corn pollen, and we have a lot of practices that are rooted to use of other other byproducts of nature. So like feathers, claws, different things like that. All of that, I think, or a lot of that comes from Pueblo people, uh, as that's well, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say though, because then I'm sure there's some that was brought from Alaska and all the way from those north to south migrations. Uh, so yeah, it's a lot of information out there. A lot is missing, obviously. Like whenever you see this 15 to 45,000 year like mark, that's like there's 30,000 years there. That's nothing to sneeze at. You know, there's like a lot of information there, and a lot must have happened. There's a lot to infer there, and yeah, so it's just been a real treat to convey what I've learned about all this, and from the context of how I view the universe. Uh, so yeah, I guess yeah, another critical part, something I saw from a YouTube video is that uh, after the Pueblo Revolt, there were a ton of horses introduced to the population, and prior to that, people had assumed that native tribes had like basically hunted any horse-like creatures on this side of the world and all that, and then uh, so that's all indeterminate. Again, another one of those like things that's lost within a differential of like 1 to 10 million years. Uh, but yeah, so like we became horse-faring people after the Pueblo Revolt, which I find to be super, super interesting. that the Pueblo Revolt, so that just for some contextualization, the Spanish had uh, uh, started like uh, basically harassing the Pueblos in like 1580. And then by 1680, 1690, there's a really wonderful story that exists and quite a bit of like accurate information that exists about the Pueblo Revolt. So I've definitely read about that, but just like an amazing feat of communication and organization amongst all the Pueblos to basically rise up against any Spanish colonizers, and then they sent them all packing. So they all left that New Mexico region for like 1,000 years or a few hundred years, some large amount of time, basically, like uh, getting them to actually leave for a long time. But yeah, the horse introduced uh, definitely helped a lot. Like it improved our chances at hunting. It allowed us to travel more ground. They helped in agriculture as well. And all of that afforded more leisure. And just a bit about our government structure or how our politics or governmental body or representation, how all that was started is, or I don't know how that was started, but uh, I do know that it was different from the United States system. Started up from like the 13 colonies and all that. We set it up a bit different to where we have leaders for war and leaders for peace, and they don't. They I'm sure they overlapped in the past. I'm sure there's like some leader who was a wartime and a peacetime chief, but for the most part, I think it's not one of those rules, but like an exception to the rule to be a chief for both of those times. But it does show you that I think it shows me at least that there's probably more of a loose governmental structure. So instead of like a very tight grip of like IRS, like sending you like a bill basically like for living and working on this land. I think it's more like the Athapaskan and the Navajo people and uh, that whole like nomadic matriarchal society uh, was just uh, optimized to have these leaders who could either rally people for war or who could get people to uh, work together or conduct trade or all those different things when there were no times of war. So like people who can definitely help defend and like I'm not so sure about like or it doesn't seem like there's a lot of history out there about pre-Columbian interactions, as there's probably tons of like interesting like feuds that happen between Navajo people, Apache people, just and all along the way towards becoming those people. And just to share some cool words, or what I think of as cool words in the Navajo language, one is yat eh. So yat eh. And this is a good time, like all of you can practice it. Just like try and say the word, like listen to it. I'd say don't even look at the like English word. Like this is like a red herring. Like it'll just like prevent you from really like learning it. So I think it's like yat eh, yat eh, hojo, hojo, ho, atsinil ish, ho, hos. So yeah, so yeah, does anyone want to try? Try saying yat eh, the greeting.
Yate.
Excellent. Yat eh,
Yate.
excellent. Yat eh, yat eh.
Yatahei.
Pretty close. Does anyone want to try saying hojo?
Hey, Ivan, I had a question.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people say it with the T, but the correct way is to like drop the T and yeah.
I haven't. I've always heard the T.
Yeah, okay. So you say the T too. I thought I like heard it drop.
I could believe that. I could totally believe the T being dropped from like maybe a Southern dialect or like a Western dialect.
Okay.
Yeah, and take what I'm saying with a grain of salt too, because I may be saying yade, like probably like a well, yeah, I'm super inexperienced with the language, but uh, sounds good enough to me, especially what all of you practice as well. Like Sam, Elena, I would definitely understand if you both said yade.
I have also heard it though, like people say the like yatahe thing or the yatahe way.
Yeah, there's a place called Yatahe also, and I've heard that for sure. Like Yatahe. Yeah, that would like people would definitely know what you're saying if you said Yatahe, Yacht A, or Yacht A. But I think like there's some sweet spot where you're almost saying like Yaat A, like where you're saying the A, like you're saying two, like you're like as though you're going in for a shallow yawn, and then you go in for like a bellowing yawn, like ya. Eh. Yeah. So does anyone want to try Hojo?
Hojo.
Perfect. Nijoniye. That's like a way of saying you said that beautifully.
Sweet. The captions are on my computer. I don't know if they're on everyone else's, but it came up as like Johnny Sweet for your reply.
That's sweet. I just pulled that up. Does anyone want to try saying oh?
Is it got? Got.
Exactly. So that's fire. And can you feel the fire within yourself by saying ko? Okay, so this is probably the most challenging word to say. Lightning. Atsinil ish. Atsinil ish. Ish. Atsinil ish. So it's almost like an onomatopoeia, where the ish is like the thunder. So like atsinil ish is a word for lightning and thunder. There's no, as far as I know, there could be a separation between the light and the sound that may have been lost within the language or just something I'm unbeknownst to.
Atsinil gish. Maybe get that
That's
like
pretty close.
ish at the end.
Yeah, like that. Ish.
Ish.
You got it.
Atsinil gish.
Now, can somebody say to? Oh, oh, ina. That means water is life. So to is water. Ei, that's like is. And ina is life. And yeah, something interesting, like if you decide to look into Navajo history after this presentation or just sometime in the future, you might hear about this like Sheep Reduction Act. So that was like from around the 1920s, I think, or so. Anywhere from like 1880s to like 1920s, there was this time where the US government was forcing all the Navajos to get rid of their sheep and reduce their sheep numbers. So like a lot of sheep were like just killed, like millions upon millions of sheep were killed. And it's like not a bad thing that happened. Like the way it was done was bad. That was like they would just like collect all the sheep from a bunch of Navajo people and then just like kill them like in a very bad way, instead of like giving the people ownership of their sheep and like, okay, you've got like a few years to reduce your numbers, like something more normal rather than like very forced. And yeah, so that's also unfortunately one of the reasons why a lot of places like used to be called Toh something, so they'd be called like Toh Likan, is a place that's like called, that literal translation is sweet water. So like Likan is like something sweet. Uh, so like Toh Likan or like yeah, all over the Navajo Nation. So if you ever drive around like I-40 area, or you drive uh, just like through the Navajo Nation, you'll probably see a lot of places with Toh as their name, and it used to be an area with and it is like, it's a high desert, so it's already like a fragile ecosystem. And but there's a lot of like water from the, or a decent amount of water, I think, from the rivers in the snowy areas up north. But yeah, just another last minute story.
I thought it was kind of interesting that Kos and Ko, like or they're just really close, like fire and clouds. So I thought that was like, I don't know, there's something there.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, like Ko and Kos. Yeah,
Like maybe like
yeah.
the smoke, because it looks like smoke or something.
I think I like that. You sold me on that. Like I believe you. You said, hmm. I guess like something to note linguistically is that Navajo is called a very descriptive language. So there's a lot of flexibility to that. And it's studied for that reason, like for those interesting linguistic features. Yeah, any other questions, any comments about your tribes or anything like that? And yeah, I'd love to just like share any last piece of information, or I can like clarify anything.
One thing that I just have like a comment that I thought was really cool and interesting was the word for fire. It's kind of similar to the word for fire in my language here, Lisenyo. And it's weird because they're like two different language families, but the word for fire is ku. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That's very cool. Yeah, that's like extremely cool. Guess yeah, I mean like when you think about it, like there's that, like there's so much like I don't want to speak for California tribes too much, but like there is a lot of like connection between NorCal and SoCal. Like just I'm just thinking of there's a Pomo band up in Northern California and a Palma band in Southern California. And then like you think of the North as also having that Athapaskan, or as having it. So there's like two connections, almost like two native connections. There's like the like Luiseño and the Southern California, like that coup for fire. That almost seems like that's like ancient, like the Pueblos are ancient, and the Navajo having the word clon, or like the Athapaskan root seems a little less ancient, uh, like several, like tens of thousands of years different. Uh, but yeah, I mean, just that those clues, like Sam and Anthony, I think that's pretty amazing. That like, and I can believe that like 100% that there's a connection, like a strong connection between our words for fire and some historical genealogical connection.
I think we share that because one of our stories in Navajo is the white shell women comes from this area towards the west, and so there was some sort of trade that happened from with our people, with the people from this area, and I think maybe that was the influence.
That is very interesting. Did not know that.
That's extremely interesting. Who was that, by the way? Was that you, Richard?
Yeah, that was me.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, uh, I would love to learn more Navajo stories,
Yeah,
especially
even the word "con" that means smoke. It doesn't mean fire. It means the smoke. So that's why like the clouds is almost the same. Or the word for it, I mean.
if we post these slides, we can definitely change that. But yeah, Richard, are you can I ask you more questions via email, or like about Navajo culture, or like yeah, is there any way for that to?
Yeah, you can do that. That's fine.
Okay.
Um, not an expert, but there's a lot to learn, right?
Totally. Yeah. Like yeah, it's like that word expert kind of just prevents a whole lot of people from sharing information, I think.
Oh yeah, I'll in the comments I'll write my email. But yeah, you
Okay.
can get a hold of me anytime.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I grew up in New Mexico too. So
Okay, awesome. What part of New Mexico?
this place called Tayada or Standing Rock.
Okay. I'm not
It's
familiar with.
just it's close to Crown Point, between Crown Point and Gallup.
Okay. Then I'm yeah, I got a lot of family from Theroux.
Okay. Yeah, I used to live in Theroux too, but then I grew up in high school. I went to Shiprock in the Four Corners. But yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, I learned a lot from my grandparents and just them speaking to me because that's the only language they ever spoke. And so I kind of learned that way. And later on in life, I kind of learned how to write it, but I still don't know how to write it. That kind of, like you said earlier, it really throws people off. I can see it and I can pronounce it, but then when I look at it on written on paper, I can't say it. Funny.
Oh, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, but certain words I can read. But yeah.
I guess like, do you think that the like the Roman alphabet, like A through Z, is that like missing symbols that would make Navajo more easy to convey, or like is that just like that set of symbols really isn't conducive towards representing Navajo?
Yeah, it's not. There's a lot. It's more advanced, I guess. I think the only thing we got is like it's called glottal stop, and then like things that kind of describe a little bit, but it's not. There's only like two or three things like that are, keeps us from speaking the language like how it actually sounds or is written down. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like like the way they teach it to us is like the high tone, the glottal, and the nasal and the slash L are like those like few things that kind of branch us off. But yeah, I would all speculation on my part. But yeah, I very much
Yeah.
appreciate the clarification there, Richard.
Oh yeah, and there's a lot of different dialects, even from east to west on the reservation itself, and different influences like the Pueblo. I think some of our words are a little different. And we got just depends on our environment. If we get more snow, like in the mountains, like I'm coming from the mountains, so when we say the snow, we have different forms of snow versus if someone lives in the desert, lower desert or high desert, it's all high desert, but less snow, they will have a different description for it. So there's a lot of similarities and changes, but dialects basically.
Yeah, and that's like I find that beautiful. Like that's that like makes it very challenging to learn, but like we wouldn't want it any other way.
Yeah, and a lot of our language and stuff all comes from stories too. Like it's very verb based. So even like when you said lightning, the last part is the sound like when it hits the ground, it makes that sound. So that's like it's like the bright sound is the kind of better translation than just lightning. But yeah, it's a verb base.
Like there's that verb base kind of implies that there's two objects there. Like there's the lightning and the crash or like the interaction.
Yeah. Even yate, it actually means I'm doing good. Like I'm doing good in the translation. Because when we say agonet, that means be well versus goodbye, So it's
something
more
like that. Like
go ahead.
Like there's a lot of nuance there. Like when you say yate, it's not just the same as saying hello. It's like also got that connotation of like almost like spirituality comes through with that phrase. Like things are harmonious.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think it has to do with a lot of ceremonies and just, life in general is like a ceremony in itself. So we, greet life that way versus, like a Western approach where it's all about I. But yeah, it's something when you start even looking at the language, the true meaning of it, I think a lot of meaning of it has been lost a little bit or people don't know it. And even Hajo is kind of the same way. Yeah, that's like a connection with nature and ourself, and that we live in harmony. Which is beauty and balance between two worlds, or between the Mother Earth and ourselves. So Hojo is that balance, is a description of that. So there's I could go on, but there's
totally. And like we could get a Navajo from another region of the nation, and then I'm sure they'd kind of flip a few cards for us as well. But
it's a lot putting pieces of puzzles together from all of us from different areas. There's a lot of knowledge out there. You just got to put the pieces together in a puzzle. I've learned, so I do speak to a lot of different people about what they, kind of know and what I know, and then just put it together. So I was still learning a lot.
That's lovely. Yeah. Like if anything, like that's like it's kind of like we have this responsibility to learn the language and keep it alive, but like that's like a fun responsibility. Like we get to keep learning these words, and and we get to run into like other random Navajos and get into these like discussions.
Oh yeah,
things out.
Yeah, I've been around the world, and everywhere I've been, every country in the whole world, I've met a Navajo. Like it was in England, and I saw a Navajo, met Navajo, like Hawaii. I mean, oddest places, Australia, New Zealand, like just Hawaii.
Now you're just showing off, Richard. Now you're just showing off places you traveled in the world.
I was gonna say, I thought this was Ivan's presentation, Richard.
Oh no, I just get, it's interesting to me. This has been my passion, is my tradition and my culture, and so like it really sparks the interest for me. Sorry, I don't mean to take over.
Glad that you're here. No. But I did want to we were saying that linear is a colonizer's mindset, and so is time. But I do want to be conscious of that. We're coming up on 3 o'clock already. So is there more that you want to share, Ivan, or do we I want to take some more questions, or what do you?
If anyone has any questions for me, feel free to email me or like something like that. Find me on social media, whatever it may be. But yeah, it's Friday at 3, so no one wants to leave more than me.
Well, we very much appreciate you taking the time to be here with us and sharing your beautiful language. And I especially love hearing about, you as students, your individual kind of like family stories and where you're coming from and the people that you belong to and things. I really enjoyed that. So thank you for sharing that, those personal pieces as well.
Definitely. Thank you, Elena.
Yeah. And like we said, Corinne has this recorded, so we will pop it up on our YouTube page. So you can share that with anybody that you know who wasn't able to make it today. But yeah, I will leave it to Ivan to leave us with any last words or final thoughts, and just with a thank you from us. And yeah, so I'll leave it up to you, Ivan.
Thank you, everybody, for sitting through this, listening, the live audience, anyone who watches this on YouTube. Yeah, you all have a great rest of your day. You can email me at irajen@eng.ucsd.edu. So that's just my first initial and then last name. And yeah, Hakoshi, Hagone.